The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Laugh like the sun always shines, spreading will, fun times, and there's always something to remember, always something to consider.
Hi, this is Catrice Barnes, and the show Something to Consider. It's going to be a show where we feature music, musicians, astronomers, archaeologists, medical doctors, alternative health practitioners, witch doctors. We're going to focus on lifestyles, food, esoterics, and a wide range of subjects to consider. And today, my guest is, let me zoom her in, Marie Ryan.
Hi.
Hi. Marie is a friend of mine I met 4 years ago at a cancer clinic on the East Coast. We're both cancer survivors, and we thought we'd talk about some of our stories through the years and the things we've done and why we're still alive, because you're a how many year survivor of endometrial cancer?
Original diagnosis was 2006 with a reoccurrence 5 years after that. So I'm 11 years out from the original diagnosis. Yeah.
Well, I got you beat.
What's your year?
17 years.
You got me beat. You got me beat. You got me beat by 6 years. Good job. Good job.
Yeah, well, talk about how you were originally diagnosed. How did you know you had something wrong, or did you just do a regular checkup? Because endometrial cancer is not something people test for regular.
No, I was, and I didn't have any of the demographics that you would expect. Someone with estrogen cancer, endometrial cancer with estrogen dominance, usually you look for somebody that's, very overweight. I've never been overweight. I've always been on the thin side. I didn't fit, the typical pattern, but I had a lot of unusual, abnormal bleeding, and it was abnormal enough that my OB/GYN said, we need to do an endometrial biopsy. We could do one in the office, or we can go to the OR and, do it in the operating room, D&Cs. We opted to do it in the office, and it came back endometrial cancer. Knocked me right out of my chair. I was shocked to hear it because I was 46 years old. So I wasn't the right age. I wasn't the right body type. It just wasn't, it really wasn't to be expected, but it happened. It happened, and it was devastating. So that was in 2006. I did your traditional surgery, which would be the radical hysterectomy, which they removed the uterus, the ovaries, and a lot of lymph nodes, which is a difficult surgery to recover from because you're swollen like you're pregnant for quite some time, and that had to be followed up with in 2006 I had to follow up with radiation therapy. And then
you said you were in remission for 5 years, but you questioned the word remission.
Yeah, there was a 5-year period where, CAT scan, PET scan was negative, blood work was negative, and I was told at the time of surgery there was no vascular spread, all the lymph nodes were negative, and, you're good. So I was really optimistic that I was good. And then 5 years out, I developed pain in the groin area, and then there was swelling in the groin area. And most likely it's scar tissue. Let's not, get too crazy here. But then one of my doctors said, let's get a CAT scan. And, okay, that doesn't look quite right. Let's get a biopsy. And then the biopsy showed that it was a lymph node that was cancerous. So that lymph node had to have been there. That cancer had to have been there in 2006 in order for it to show up 5 years later. But it wasn't enough cancer to be picked up by blood work or a PET scan or a CAT scan for 5 years. For 5 years.
So basically you still had the cancer for 5 years.
it had to have been there because the uterus was totally removed. So the uterus doesn't grow back. So it had to have been there all along, but it just, that lymph node wasn't sampled at that time of surgery, so we didn't pick up on it, is the only way it was explained to me. So that was really, really unfortunate because we felt 95% or more confident that I was, surgical cure, back in 2006. But that didn't turn out that way 5 years later.
I understand the shock of being diagnosed because when I was diagnosed in 2000, I was a vegetarian and organic eating vegetarian type person. And everybody assumes when you're eating healthy, you're not going to end up with breast cancer. And, through the years in doing all types of alternative therapies, I've learned there's a certain naivety in that mindset.
Yeah, you're not totally protected. I was following what I thought was a healthy diet. I was biking. I was doing 20-mile bike rides. I was doing yoga. I was swimming. I thought I was doing all the right things. And it happened anyway. So you do everything that's right or that you think is right, but it can still happen. And it did.
Did anyone else in your family have it?
No.
Oh, wow. No, so it wasn't even like a history of...
Not even a family history. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So what types of things did you do after you were re-diagnosed? Yeah,
because in that 5-year period, I just continued to do what I thought was a healthy diet and exercise, which I enjoyed very much. Then after the situation changed, 5 years later, so now we're into like 2012, I knew I had to do things differently because now this is a situation where the cancer was in a lymph node. That lymph node became a tumor. That tumor involved that surrounding area. So now they're telling me this is a stage 3C, which is, I know, my background as a nurse practitioner, and I worked in oncology, so I know that that's much more serious. And in order to prove survivorship, I thought I would do what they recommended, which was chemo and radiation, but I wanted to also supplement that, strengthen that with some alternative therapies. So I did the second surgery. I did full pelvic radiation again, and I did also their chemotherapy, and I was quite toxic and quite sick with a wiped out immune system. And then I said, okay, how do I build myself back up? Rebuild. And that's when I started to explore things like IV vitamin C and other things that could really, strengthen the body. And I wanted to prevent reoccurrence, and I didn't really know if I was clear. I didn't know if they got at surgery, they could remove what they could see, but you don't know, did you get microscopic? Has it spread further? You just don't know. So I wanted to be thorough, more thorough this time than I was even 5 years earlier.
Okay. And the vitamin C, how long did you do that before you started seeing a difference in your immune system?
I had a port put in for the chemotherapy, so when I kept it in so I could do the IV vitamin C, because it can be a little hard on your veins in the arms and in your hands. It's very, very acidic. So I kept the port in place. I did IV vitamin C for about a good 2 years, and I wasn't getting sick, but I still had a very, very low white count. With so much chemo and so much radiation, I was just, my white count plummeted. I was neutropenic. I was taking injections to help the immune system. So I still wasn't quite where I wanted to be with the immune system, even after that much work with vitamin C. So then I started looking into other things like GC-MOF. You may have heard of GC-MOF, an injectable.
Yes. Okay. GC-MOF, I know, because, go ahead, talk about GC-MOF.
It's expensive. It comes from another country. You can't. I'm not able to get it anymore, and I'm not looking to get it anymore. But I started using something like that to build up the immune system because when we measured the white count, the T cells, the phagocytic index, and all of those types of things, your CD3, CD4, CD8, your T cells come from your thymus gland, and that's a good part of your immune system. And mine were all low. They were in the gutter. So, and killer cells, your natural killer cells like CD57, CD56, again, mine were tanking down still this far out. So I was looking for other things, and that's why I added the GC-MOF. I used it for maybe about 8 or 9 months, but I did not see improvement. So I scratched it. Well,
I remember researching GC-MOF, and I called one of the companies in the UK that sells it, and it is expensive.
It's expensive.
And I remember it's like $800 for a month supply.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, it's expensive. Yeah. and you have to inject yourself at home. It's by injection. Yeah.
They were kind of saying it was a cure, and
they were
about to opening a clinic in Switzerland, and had a lot of people believing that. And I remember drilling the lady over the phone about what it was and how it was made and everything, and her response was, "I find this line of questioning offensive." And I was like, well, if I'm going to send $800 to the UK for something that I've never, I don't even know you guys, and I know that clinic closed.
And they should be able to answer any question you have, and they should be able to stand by their product.
And I don't know how effective it is either. I mean, I'm not familiar. I'm not hearing about anybody using. I mean, no one in my circle that I hear about using it anymore. But I know quite a few people that tried it, but I didn't see anybody turn around with a cure from it. And that's another thing about alternative therapies, though. In my 17 years, I've done mostly alternative therapies.
Yes.
I'm lucky to be alive with the things that I've done. I am really lucky. I'm just like a dumbass when I look back at some of the things I've done, and including going to Japan for a healing retreat for some energetic, I don't even know what that was. It was like a week and a half or something at this retreat where you sit under domes and these crystal domes.
And that was a cancer treatment?
Any disease.
Cure? What was that?
Any cure. Everything.
Okay.
That was stupid. That was really dumb.
Well, we'll say, different states of consciousness. Okay.
Yeah.
You were exploring.
Well, speaking of vitamin C, the Hematology Times this past 2 weeks actually posted an article about vitamin C at the Perlmutter Cancer Center, and they say that vitamin C may reprogram mutated stem cells, causing them to re-enter a normal pathway in which they mature and eventually die instead of becoming.
And that's in one specific type of cancer?
They didn't really say.
Oh, okay.
It was just an article.
Okay. Excellent. I'm glad it's being.
It was for leukemia. For
leukemia?
I forgot which one. AML.
Acute myelocytic lymphoma.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad they're looking at it because it's been used, and if there's efficacy, let's know about it. Yeah. For sure.
Well, I remember years ago. I mean, vitamin C was one of the first things I did 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. And there was a doctor who shall remain nameless in Manhattan I went to. And I remember going and getting the drips and feeling nauseous every time I got a drip.
Really?
And then I ended up looking for another clinic just to find something cheaper. And so I ended up trekking to Brooklyn to this other clinic. And I found out one of the guys who worked there used to work for the doctor in Manhattan. And he told me that doctor used cheap vitamins.
What type of vitamins?
Cheap vitamins.
Oh,
that's
cheap,
why I
cheap.
was getting sick from the vitamin C drips as opposed to what was happening in Brooklyn. And, that's another thing about the alternative world is people just assume people have integrity.
That's right.
And what I've seen is that there are a lot of people out here who don't mind taking your last $10,000, $15,000,
That's right. Yes, if you're looking into alternative therapies, be very careful because they are expensive.
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 I
Yes.
remember this guy even mailing me a BioRay machine that I didn't even ask for. That was $4,000 COD. I mean, I was into BioRays for a time period.
I remember that stuff came across my desk too. Yeah, I looked at it. Yeah. You know, it's funny because a lot of these therapies, the testimonials, they're just so convincing.
I know.
And you know, you're at a point where you want something that's going to work now, or maybe you think you've got 2 weeks, maybe you think you've got 3 months to live. So you want something that's going to work quick. And testimonials can be so convincing, but you know, proof is in the pudding. You know, people are really, you know, can you find someone who can reproduce those resuls? I mean, true results are reproducible. Yeah.
I'm going to pull up the picture of this device I bought years ago. I can't even believe this is one of the reasons why I say I'm surprised I'm alive still. I paid $800 for this Onetsu. Now it doesn't even look medical. If you could see it, and
not on my screen, but that's okay. Yeah.
The woman who sold it, I met her at one of those health expos that they do in New York regularly,
Right.
And you know. She's with all these other cancer experts, so I just assumed she was an expert. And she had a book called Overcome Cancer. So, you know, she did one of her little heat therapies on me that day. And I was like, okay. She says, you need to come and see me. So I started going to see her. And she convinced me that device and this energy device were going to get rid of the cancer. And it actually made it worse over an 8-month time period. But I also had some of my other friends going to her for different things like fibroids and, you know, sciatica or whatever. And she was just taking our money, basically. And then I eventually had that device analyzed by a friend of mine who's an electrician. And he said, well, you just bought a $800 iron.
Oh, my God.
That really is worth $25, at most $30 after he opened it up.
That's why, yes, we have to be careful. And, you know, we really have to help each other. Those of us who've been there and we've been through it, you know, we've got to help each other, like, you know, what to do and what not to do.
Oh, yeah. And especially with the supplements and all the things you take internally, because this at least was like a heat device. But when you start taking supplements inside, I mean, you could mess yourself up if you're allergic.
You could take something that's going to promote cancer growth. You know, if you really, you know, like there are certain juices out there that people take, you know, they could be taking too much sugar. They could be, you know, hurting themselves without proper guidance.
Oh, I went through that with this alternative doctor who convinced me to do a Budwig-esque diet.
Okay.
Which was more vegetarian with flaxseed and not flaxseed, I would just say just juicing every day. And my markers just skyrocketed from juicing every day. And I started developing fibromyalgia symptoms too. And after I got so sick, I stopped it and cut out carbs. And in 3 days, all those fibromyalgia symptoms disappeared. So that's another thing. People don't realize how many different kinds of cancers there are. How many different body types?
Yes.
Blood types, environmental stuff, you know.
And a cancer type that you start off with can change. And what a cancer responds to initially can change.
Oh,
so
yeah.
even when I did some of these alternative therapies, I rotated them because it just seemed like, you know, whatever modality you used, you know, use it with wisdom. And now even with traditional chemotherapy or IPT chemotherapy, they're rotating the chemotherapies so the cancer doesn't become resistant to it. So we have to think of that in terms of even natural therapies. You rotate them or you change it up a little bit. So the
now
cancer...
you mentioned IPT. There are probably a lot of people who don't know.
Let's good point. Let's go back over that.
Okay.
Yes. Insulin potentiated therapy. Maybe, yeah, Catrice, you actually went through it. Maybe you would like.
I actually went to this
actually
clinic in Chicago where Dr. Stephen Eyre brought IPT to America. I'm actually on their website right now.
Okay.
But the concept of it is kind of hard being tech director and talking at the same time. Okay. The concept of it is that cancer loves sugar. And when you inject somebody with insulin, it opens up the cancer's insulin receptors, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then you blast that person with like a low dose amount of chemo, and it supposedly kills more cancer cells.
Right, because the cancer cell will see the insulin, and the cancer cells have many insulin receptors on that cell membrane. So the insulin goes to the cell membrane first, opens up the channel, and then they push the chemotherapy so it gets right into the cell. In theory. And I do believe, in theory, and I do believe it makes sense. It makes sense.
I mean, it did work a little bit. I mean, it brought my numbers down.
Okay, and you did it for?
About 8 months. That was in 2012. That was the only chemo I've had in 17 years, though.
Amazing. So you've done a lot of natural therapies or alternative therapies.
Yeah. And but I've taken some medications too, but not like I've not done the heavy duty chemo, lose your hair, sick, vomiting thing. So I haven't done that. But I also am somebody who will do a 2-week fast.
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
I have the ability to do that, so other people can't, and they're finding more and more that fasting takes what were we talking about? Fasting takes the T regulatory cells, it expels it from the T regulatory cells actually help the cancer hide in the immune system. Yeah, it cloaks it. So when you fast, your body then is able to find the cancer or weakens the cancer, right?
Yes, that's exactly what we were reading. Yeah, and now when you're fasting, you're water fasting. You're
water
drinking
fast.
Just water. Okay.
Well, I have potassium issues, so I'll do occasional bone broth too. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And people are intimidated by that word fasting, but you can actually work up to it. You can do a 12-hour fast. Just to start, you can fast, let's say, from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., only have water. And then maybe if you're okay with that, then you can do a 16-hour fast. And then, if you're okay with that, you do a 24-hour fast. And you'd be surprised how you can train your body to accommodate the fasting, which the benefits are amazing. And they're using it with also, the cancer cells cannot, they just keep living and living and living. They don't die. However, when you're fasting, the cancer cell mechanism changes, and now they do die because of the fasting.
I'm going to pull up a picture of this professor named Walter Lugo. He's the professor and director of the University of Southern California Longevity Institute, and he's one of the ones pioneering this low-calorie fasting-like diet with chemotherapy that is enabling the immune system to recognize and kill skin and breast cancer cells. And this is like some recent studies too. This isn't like some internet,
right.
YouTube channel. Like, oh yeah, this will cure your cancer. This is like research
it can potentiate your chemotherapy. It can potentiate if you're doing traditional methods, it can potentiate it. So there's a lot of benefit to these fasting techniques.
Yeah, I mean, they're just actually starting the research now. I mean, they're just with fasting, the ketogenic diet, and combining that with like mistletoe extract or things like DCA that seem to be helping people manage or even shrink tumors. Because another guy out in Boston College, Thomas Seyfried, he's actually pioneering this
He does the ketogenic diet?
He does ketogenics. He wrote a book called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, and he's
right.
He created this formula. I'm going to pull it up really quick. That I think is masterful.
This is when you're going to actually measure your ketones in your blood. Yes.
If you in his laboratory, if you take a blood glucose level and divide it by 18, and then divide it by your ketones, which ends up being your glucose ketone factor, and say if yours is around, I guess, 70 in the 70s, and you divide it by 18, and your ketones are like 4.0, you get a GK factor of like 1. They found that anytime someone was a 1 or below, or the rats were 1 or below,
the rats,
the tumors would shrink or the cancer cells would be weakened.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so that's just with food.
That's exciting.
So, weaken cancer cells, and then you add a little bit of chemo, or add a little bit of this, or add a little bit of that.
I mean, think about it, instead of going to these really expensive things, these things, fasting, ketogenic diet, you're not going to go broke, and you're going to potentiate any therapy that you're already considering. So this is really excellent information to share with people.
Oh, yeah. And if people don't know what a ketogenic diet is, it's a high-fat, low-protein, low-carb diet. And people differ in terms of how much fat you should eat. I even read recently a doctor said you should have at least 7 cups of vegetables a day on it.
Hard to do, yeah.
But what's different about the cancer ketogenic diet is that it's calorie restricted, which is different than the ketogenic diet people are doing just to lose weight. You can't be eating all that food. You can't be eating all that protein. You can't be eating all that cheese.
Right.
It's got to be calorie restricted. It's like it's almost putting your body in that fasting state.
Wow.
And then people can see the results. I mean, I've seen the results in it myself.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent.
Well, this has been a great show. Thanks for coming in, and I'll see you next Thursday at 9 p.m. Something to consider.
Till then.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Through the night, made me feel so right. And there's always